Good morning and welcome to Navient Solution Spotlight for the month of June. We are today talking about Office integrations, EDM services, as well as the Office business application. Couple of quick housekeeping components before we get too deep into this. You are all on mute within this GoToWebinar. So if you do need to communicate with me in any form or fashion, please use the chat box that's available within the GoToWebinar panel that appears typically on the right side of your screen. We will be taking questions at the end of the webinar, so please use the questions panel for that. Yes, we are recording this session, so look for a follow-up email after this session for the recording. And also, please take a few moments to complete the survey that appears at the end of this webinar so that we can better serve you in the future. Please share any topic ideas that you might have. My name is Guy Schrader. I am Manager of Sales Engineering with Navient, and I'll be your sole host this morning for this webinar. And as usual, we are going to go through a relatively quick agenda. Ultimately, we're going to talk about what is EDM Services and why you might need it, and the same thing for Office business application. Now, as we go along, you'll see some screenshots for the demonstration, and towards the end, we will talk about licensing as well as covering questions and answers. So, at the highest level, EDM Services, what is it? Well, really at its core, it is revision and version control of documents. So think of any live document that you have, whether it be a Word document, Excel spreadsheet, PDFs can be living documents, e-forms, so on and so forth. We can turn on the system to track revisions as well as versions. What that really allows us to do now is to collaborate with multiple users directly inside of OnBase, allowing different users to update documents and information within the system. Any changes that you make to these documents are going to be stored directly in OnBase right upon save, so that there's no need to upload a new copy of a document. You're just doing it directly inside of OnBase, and it's now going to store those changes. And as those changes are being saved, it automatically will create a new revision or version depending upon how you have the system configured and how you want it to behave appropriately. The most recent revision or version of the document is going to be displayed automatically when a user retrieves that document from that point forward. So you can always ensure that your users are viewing the latest, greatest version or revisions of documents. Now, to make this work properly, the document type needs to be configured appropriately to allow revisions or versions. So to demonstrate that, I'm going into OnBase and the configuration module just to show you how that works. Here you can see I have my draft contracts document type selected on the left, and you can see towards the middle of the screen I have my rendition and revision button. Once EDM Services is licensed, that button will now actually allow you to update all of the revision settings that you see towards the middle of the screen. By default, as you set up document types, they are set up as non-revisable. You can go ahead and change them to allow multiple revisions on these different documents, and you can see a number of the different options that are presented there. Not meant to be a full training class here, but you can see that there's a variety of different options for how the system can behave as we are creating revisions of documents. So, and again, really what that allows us to do is to take Microsoft Office documents first and foremost. Most of the world uses Microsoft Office. We can now perform inline editing of those documents directly inside of OnBase without opening up any third-party applications. So really what that allows us to do is it gives us the power and the capabilities of Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, that entire interface directly inside the OnBase client as you're displaying those documents. So to highlight what we're looking at here, this is the OnBase Unity client, and you can see I've retrieved my draft contract document type, and my hit list is over on the right-hand side. Now the first thing I want to call up before I get too deep into this, notice that each of those different hit list items has a number in front of that. If you do not have EDM Services turned on, you've probably never seen that number there. That denotes the revision or the version of the document that is current. So let's go ahead and pick on this ABC rental, company ABC rental agreement. We can see that there's a 2 in front of it. I'll just blow that up for us relatively quickly. That 2 denotes that that is our second revision of the document, which is the current. When I actually open up that document, the first thing that you'll notice is this is full-fledged Microsoft Word. The native file format is being maintained here, and it brings up all of the Word capabilities that you are used to using just outside the OnBase world. Notice in the upper right hand corner it also tells us that we are looking at revision 2 of this document. So that's another nice capability. Anytime that you're viewing the document, you'll see that button up there on the screen. Now let's fast forward just a little bit. I turned on Microsoft Word Track Changes. I'm showing my markups, and I've just deleted that entire section 2, that disclosure of confidential information that you see on the right-hand side of the screen. When I use my Microsoft Word Save button, the diskette that appears at the upper left-hand corner of Microsoft Word, OnBase intercepts that request, and depending upon how we have our revision control set up, it can prompt us saying, what do you want to do with this document now that you've changed it? Do I want to save it as a revision? Do I want to save it as a new document? Because you could potentially open up a Word document and repurpose it for a different entity, or cancel out of this. In our case, we're going to go ahead and save this as a revision since we're talking about revision control. The system can be configured to prompt the user for any revision comments, and this comes in handy, and we'll see that within a few moments here. When I click OK on that, you'll see that in my upper right-hand corner, it now refreshes that revision number. I'm now viewing revision 3 of 3. I can go ahead and actually click directly on that revision 3 of 3 button up there. And that's going to open up another screen showing us all of the revisions and renditions. With the most recent appearing at the top, you can see the comments that I had typed in there, remove the disclosure of confidential information section. Plus, we have some additional capabilities. If you have appropriate rights, you could double-click on any one of those other revision numbers to display that revision as a read-only document. You can't modify older revisions. But notice I can also put check marks in multiple of these different revisions and use that compare button down at the bottom. This is something that's unique to Microsoft Word that would then spawn a Microsoft Word window, taking that revision 3 in my case and revision 1 and doing a comparison, highlighting where all of this information changed between the two different selected revisions of this particular document. So that's all and good for Microsoft Word documents, but what about other file types? Well, it somewhat depends upon the file type, how OnBase is going to operate. Word, Excel, PowerPoint would function exactly as I had just shown you a few moments ago. But what if you're dealing with a PDF document? Well, a lot of people look at PDFs and say those should be non-revisable. But some organizations actually do want to annotate and mark up PDF documents and make some modifications using Adobe Acrobat Professional. How to do that inside of OnBase is to use a feature called persistent checkout. So you need to check that document out. When you do that, that makes a local copy of that PDF file on your hard drive in a specific location. It would then open up your Adobe Acrobat editing tool, whatever that might be, where you can make those markups, those changes associated with that, save that local copy, and then go back to OnBase and say, check this document back in, which now creates a new revision and makes that revision available for all of your users. So to highlight how this actually works, here you can see an OnBase 17 Technical Requirements Overview document that's in a PDF format that we happen to have in OnBase here. So I'm viewing the document. I can currently see that we're on revision 4.4 within the system. But notice up on my toolbar, my ribbon bar, there's an action called Checkout. That is our persistent checkout, which when I click on that, that again will make that local copy and automatically open up that document with whatever is my PDF editing tool. In my case, Adobe Acrobat Professional. I can use all of the tools of Adobe Acrobat here, and in this particular case, you can see I added some highlighting, I added some additional text within there. When I save that, I can now come back into OnBase, and using that button that we see highlighted in the upper right-hand corner, that is our check in button. When I check that in, again, it's taking that locally stored copy and now prompting us for starters, what do I want to do with this? Save this as a revision or a new document, as we saw before. In my case, saving it as revision, it now refreshes that display for that document with all of my annotations, and I can quickly see here that I'm currently on revision 5 of 5 for that particular document. Unity forms. So Unity forms in and of themselves, if you're familiar with them, it is an electronic form that, depending upon how you have it configured, could allow users to make modifications to individual fields from the point in time that that form is initially submitted until final end disposition of that form. A lot of organizations lock those forms down, but if you chose to allow those fields to be editable, you can use EDM Services now to track all of those revisions natively. If you make any changes to any of those fields on a Unity form and save that back, it effectively just overstamps that form, so you don't really have granular control to understand all of the specific changes that were made to that Unity form. When we enable this revision control, it's going to automatically create that new revision when we click Save or Submit, whatever that button is that saves that Unity form. So again, I have that entire revision history for that Unity form. So to demonstrate here relatively quickly, I have this grant service request electronic form here. You can see I'm currently on revision 2 of 2. If I come in here and add all of this additional information for like the proposed budget and other components and submit that form back into the system, that then saves that form and it creates that new revision, because I've said this NavGrant grant services request document type is set up for revision control. So it's really as simple as that. That's very seamless from that perspective. And again, we still have all of those capabilities to click on that revision button to see the different revisions where I could go back into time and view any of those prior revisions as a read-only document. So a lot of people say image documents, something that's been scanned. Well, you're probably familiar with notes capabilities inside of OnBase, so sticky notes, highlights, things like that. Those are layers on top of the document. That doesn't really burn any changes into the initial document itself, but there's some scenarios where you might want to be able to perform further markups on some of these image documents. Signatures is a good example to be able to add things like that. Well, when we enable that EDM services on an image document type, that allows us the ability to go ahead and add image markups to this document. And that is an additional configuration item that needs to be set up for that particular document type. And just so that you're aware, for your users and the user groups that, the user groups and the users that belong to that group, there is a security configuration called Enable Markup Tool. That needs to be selected also to enable these features and functions that you're going to see here within a moment. That allows us to truly mark up the image with additional information, and when we actually then save that into the system and close that, that revision is actually stored in the system. So let's highlight that relatively quickly here. Obviously a scanned image based upon the quality that we're seeing here. I only have one note on this document, but you see I don't have any revisions in the upper right-hand corner that we've been talking about yet. One of the capabilities with EDM Services and turning on that markup tools capability that we talked about, you have this whole markup section. And here you can see there's lines and shapes, whether they're rectangles, ellipses, check marks, freehand writing, putting revision stamps in here, adding text boxes, things like that. Those are all enabled within the system through that capability. So rather than me showing you each of those different capabilities, you can see I've added some circles here and some lines, some fonts, different colors, so on and so forth. That's truly marking up that document, but notice that I have the ability to now save that back into the system. In my case, I'm just going to go ahead and save it, and when I do that, it refreshes the image, and now I can currently see that I have revision 2 of 2 on this particular document. Again, that prior revision would be without those annotations. These annotations are actually burnt into this image, so there's really no way of removing them, short of coming back into the system and further marking up that image. So far we've talked only about revisions. I mentioned earlier revisions and versions. Well, what about versions? I like to look at this and say revisions are minor changes to the document, versions are major changes to the document. What you can do is to restrict your different users and user groups to only view major versions or to be able to view all versions and revisions. So when you take a look at this a little bit further, you can look at this and say, use revisions when you have a process where you have multiple users collaborating on these different documents. All those users that are providing input into these documents need to be able to see all these different revisions. Succinctly put, those can be your different workflow participants, need to have those revision capabilities. But when that entire workflow process is done and now everybody's given their stamp of approval on those changes, have the system create a major version or publish that document as a major version. The rest of your users that were not an active participant in that review process would now have the ability to go ahead and see that major version of the document, again ensuring that now all of the users are seeing the latest, greatest, but they don't have to see all these minor changes that were taking place over time. So here's just a different example of that, a different document type. You can see it's an image document type. I currently have 2 revisions of this document. And when I pop open my revisions and renditions, you can see there's a version column way on the left-hand side that's not populated, but I have these 2 revisions. Manually, I can right-click on any one of those revisions and say stamp a new version. And when I do that, I'm prompted with the version name. So again, similar to the comments, we can go ahead and add any additional information. And now I see that major version. Again, the users that only have permissions to see the versions would see just this latest version of the document. They wouldn't see revision 1 whatsoever. So another great way to go ahead and get documents out to users in the appropriate format. Policies and procedures, I think, is always a great example, or work instructions. Let's make sure that everybody and their brother has the capability of viewing major versions, but only those people that are involved with the review and editing of these documents would have revisions capabilities to them. By the way, this can all be automated through workflow. One of your workflow actions is called stamp version. Just wanted to highlight that. So think if you truly do have a a workflow process configured, you can actually now get to the point where through an ad hoc action, you can have the system automatically stamp a brand new version, which now makes that available to all the users within your system. So let's recap here a little bit. Why would you potentially need this? Well, again, if you're storing live documents inside of OnBase, this is the great example where you need to be able to provide those collaboration capabilities and store all those changes. So you have those collaboration capabilities. That ability to compare those document revisions is paramount when you have this really dynamic process that multiple people can be collaborating. What changed? You can't rely upon users always turning on track changes inside of Microsoft Word. You have that entire document history for all the revisions and versions that just wouldn't be there before, and you have all of this additional auditing capability for all these document modifications. And think of this again, if you truly have a workflow process where these dynamic documents are changing, this allows for the review, but also those modifications of those documents, creating those revisions that may very well be paramount to that process. All things said and done, this helps to eliminate the confusion surrounding what's the latest, greatest version of the document, and it makes people that much more efficient if they know that they're viewing the latest, greatest version of the document. This thing just outside of OnBase, file shares, yeah, people can collaborate, but people can always make copies of documents. So now what's the right copy? Is this the right folder? Is this the right location? If everything's all in OnBase with EDM services turned on, with the versions and revision control, you can ensure that your users are viewing the appropriate version of that document. So think about life without EDM services. You can have those multiple document copies that I just mentioned. People can override other people's changes, so you always have that confusion. Without EDM services inside of OnBase, you could store these documents, but a lot of people are using keywords to manage those revisions and versions. That's fraught with peril because people don't always follow the same conventions, or people still could go ahead and overstamp something that was out there and it was incorrect. It's always also difficult to discern what's in progress versus an actual final copy of that document. So with EDM services, there are a handful of additional things that you get with it that are related. Document templates being one of those. You could store a template of a document inside of OnBase in a specific area, and then expose those templates to your different users where they can pull that verbiage up, the appropriate formats for these form letters, contracts, things like that. Manually make the revisions to that particular document, and when they save, it knows, save it to the specific document type inside of OnBase and prompt the user for all the indexing. Nice additional complement to this. Another benefit that you get is now you can import more than one document at a time. You can drag and drop multiple items into the OnBase import dialog, and the system will then walk through each individual document. So you don't have to drag one document, index it, drag another document, index it. Take a half a dozen documents, drag them all, and I'll walk through all of those documents, allowing you to be more efficient within the indexing process. That persistent checkout functionality that we just mentioned before, that's an additional add-on that you get also. So that really concludes everything that we're going to talk about within EDM services, but the other half of this webinar was to talk through the Office Business application. Well, what is that, all things said and done, and how does that complement? Well, the Office Business application brings to your users of the Microsoft Office suite, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, an OnBase plugin that allows them, when they're working within Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, to save the document that they're working on directly into OnBase without saving it elsewhere and importing it later, to retrieve documents, potentially editing them directly from whatever Office Suite application that they have open, access workflow, open up new forms and populate them, even importing files of other types other than, for example, Word. If I have Word open, I can import any file type by using the import functionality and still browse and grab that information. Another extension of OnBase to now bring to that user, regardless of the interface where they live quite often, OnBase content and make them that much more efficient. So when I'm retrieving a document and I'm actually retrieving a file type that is of the type for the application that I have open, a doc.dot or docx file extension. When I happen to have Microsoft Word open, it's going to use Word to actually natively display that document. Any other file type that I happen to retrieve is going to open OnBase within a whole separate window and give us just a display viewer of that information. So let's highlight how this works. Microsoft Word. Everybody's probably seen this at some point in time, but there's an OnBase tab that will get installed with this Office Business application. And here you can see the handful of different items that are there within that ribbon bar for OnBase. The ability to go ahead and open documents, save them, a number of items when a document is actually open, my keywords, notes, cross-references, so on and so forth, ability to get to workflow, opening and populating forms, importing other file types, getting to some of those document templates that we talked about. Again, all available directly within the Microsoft Word interface. So let's use open and just highlight that relatively quickly. If I want to say I want to use native document retrieval here, excuse me, just for one moment. When I actually use the document retrieval option here, you can see it actually prompts me now with a typical OnBase document retrieval dialog. I've retrieved all my offer letters within the system here, so if I double click on any one of these, I'll take this one for Jason Knight. You can see that it opens that document, since it is of Word format, natively within Microsoft Word here, and now I have all of my information icons accessible to me since I have a document open from OnBase. To view my keywords, you can see it opens up a panel on the right-hand side here. I could potentially edit this. If I want to view notes or add any notes, I can click on the Notes button. Let's just add a note relatively quickly here. You can see it pops open the dialog to say what note type do we want to create. Let's create a call note, and you can see it creates that on the right-hand side of my screen, date and timestamps like any note does, and I can go ahead and add any free-form text into that notes field. Note I can update some information here, updated my dates as well as the hourly rate. When I click Save on this, just like the rest of EDM services, since this document type happens to be set up as revisable, and I get the prompt, save it as a revision or a new document, we'll save it as a revision. That refreshes that view. For me to see all of those revisions or versions, I need to click on the Revisions and Renditions button here, and similar to what we saw before, that gives us all those capabilities to view the prior versions, revisions, and or compare those documents together. Now for something different, if I go in and say at this point in time I want to open up a different document type, here you can see that I have my signed contracts up here, and take this effective non-disclosure agreement for Evolution Software. When I open that up, since it happens to be a document image, it opens that up within a whole separate window rather than trying to put that natively within the Microsoft Word window. And I have all the same capabilities there. What about Excel? I said that this works for Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. There you can see my OnBase tab, the ability for me to take the spreadsheet that I typed in and save it directly into OnBase, and then that prompts with an upload dialog that you see on the right-hand side of my screen, where I can come in here, select the appropriate document type, provide all the indexing keywords, and then click my import button down there. At that point in time, that document is going to be saved into the system. But I want to call your attention, at least initially here, to the title bar. Right now it's 850A2071.whatever.excel for the file name. As soon as I import this into OnBase, it will actually refresh that name to whatever the OnBase auto name string is going to be also. So this is another visual indicator to understand that this document came from OnBase when it refreshed here. So, relatively quick recap here. Why would you need Office Business Application? Well, if you live in Microsoft Office Suite all day long, that's one good reason. Bring OnBase directly to where you work most often from day to day. Again, we can collaborate on all those Office documents in OnBase. It's the natural complement to EDM Services here with that revision control capabilities. So let's talk about licensing relatively quickly here. EDM Services is an enterprise license. You buy it once, and that enables all of those EDM Services features for all of your OnBase users. You do need to turn this on document by document type for those document types that should be revisable. Office Business Application is also an enterprise license. Previously, that was licensed specific to the version of Microsoft Office. Now it is version agnostic. So as you are a la carte upgrading your different users to newer versions of Microsoft Office, no problems. Office Business Application is going to work perfectly fine with them without any licensing limitations. There's no limitations on how many workstations that you can install this on. Your only limitation really is going to be based upon the number of OnBase concurrent or named user clients that you have in the system. If you're interested in any pricing whatsoever, contact your Navient account executive. They would be more than happy to assist you and provide some pricing for you. So with that, it's time for questions and answers. But before, while you're typing that into the GoToWebinar panel, I wanted to bring you up to speed on just a couple of upcoming events for Navient. OnBase 18, if you haven't heard, is ready to be released. It's going to be coming up very, very shortly. Actually, it has been released, but their Highland is still working on all the documentation that goes along with it. So on July 18th, get it, OnBase 18, on July 18, we are having a Navient support webinar on what's new in OnBase 18. So if you're interested in an upgrade to OnBase 18 or just want to keep current on some of the new features and functionality, I encourage you to sign up for that webinar. That's always available for registration off of the Navient.com website. And also just wanted to pitch the upcoming Navient Summit. This year happening in Madison at the Monona Terrace on October 15th and 16th. If you haven't attended that in the past, I'd strongly encourage you to look at it. It is a free event. You just need to register, but there's great educational opportunities and the ability to go ahead and network with your peers at different organizations. So with that, we leave the questions and answers here, and I don't see anything at this point in time, so I'll just wrap up this webinar. I will stick on for a few more minutes in case there happens to be any Q&A that comes through. I'll be more than happy to answer that. But thank you very much for your attention today, and I hope that you have a great day. Take care.